extremely low level and eat more protein and fat, which then people tend to get filled up and they eat fewer calories. But the traditional way of following the Atkins diet is with a lot of saturated fat. So people are having bacon and cheese and cream and prime rib and just going out of their way to eat highly saturated fat foods, mostly animal foods. And a lot of these animal foods are pretty toxic. I mean, like cream and bacon, full of not only a lot of saturated fat, but in the case of bacon, a lot of other carcinogenic and toxic components like heterocyclic amines and nitrates and too much salt. But in any event, you can't lose weight that way. But it's not good for your bones. It's not good for your arteries, and it's just there's healthy ways to do this, but the old-fashioned Atkins diet is generally not there. There are the supposedly the new Atkins diet where they focus more on low glycemic index vegetables, like green leafy vegetables. That actually, you can do that in a healthy fashion. And we'll talk about that more in a few moments. So the Atkins, the next slide shows that the Atkins, diet claims that you won't be hungry, you have better heart health and memory function. The heart health is certainly debatable. We've known for over 100 years, Dr. Ansel Keys and others have shown that a diet high in saturated fat will raise your cholesterol and increase risk for heart attack and stroke and premature death. So you might get skinny, but your arteries won't be healthy, and you won't live a long, healthy life by eating Atkins diet day in and day out. This kind of diet, high in protein and high in fat, will reduce risk of type 2 diabetes and metabolic syndrome, but again, there's healthier ways to do it. So the next slide talks about the South Beach diet, and that's Dr. Arthur Agatston. He's a bright guy. His book is much closer to the mark, but the problem I have with South Beach diet now is that Dr. Agatston basically sold out, and he has all sorts of highly processed food products like Atkins bar and Atkins cereal and Atkins this and that, frozen foods that are basically highly processed foods that might be low in sugar and starch, but they're higher in a lot of salt and other chemicals that are not necessarily good for you. But he is right on target when he talks about you restrict the processed carbohydrates and get out of the cycle of carbohydrate craving, which is sort of an addictive cycle that a lot of Americans just go through life eating way too much food that is from grains and added sugars. So this South Beach diet does ban unhealthy fats but promotes healthy ones, and I agree with him on that. You don't want to be eating cream and bacon and prime rib, but you do want to be eating things like avocados and nuts and fatty fish like herring and salmon and sardines. They really restrict the carbs, which is good. You want to get rid of the sugars and most of the grains. So the next slide talks about the concerns about the South Beach. It basically, this first 2 weeks is called the induction phase, where they say no potatoes, which I agree. I don't think potatoes are healthy food for the most part. If you're going to eat a starchy food like some new red potatoes, the small red ones with the skin on, are acceptable in small quantities. You would want to make it a daily staple, but as a treat, there are some redeeming features of it that they don't absorb quite as quickly, and they have a lot of vitamin C and potassium in them. But they also restrict fruits. I agree with bread and cereal restriction, rice and pasta. But beets and carrots are healthy. Corn, it's not terrible, but it's a little starchy. So, and during this induction phase, you lose a lot of water, which is kind of like the point of the juice fast. Some of these other diets where, when your weight goes down quickly, it's mostly water weight, and it comes right back on as soon as you go back to your previous diet. We don't have a slide on this one, but there is a diet book out recently by a cardiologist that I know. His name is William Davis. Dr. Davis is from up in Milwaukee. He has a book called The Wheat Belly, W-H-E-A-T very easily digestible products that have gluten, can cause allergies, but and can stimulate this sort of addiction to these carbs. A lot of people admit that they just can't give up their pasta or their bread or their rolls or whatever it is. His point is you eliminate all wheat from the diet, people get dramatically more healthy with respect to their weight, their blood pressure, their glucose, their thinking, all sorts of things, their immune system. So that's a book that I would recommend reading, and he outlines a good healthy diet in that as well. So next, let's talk about the Ornish diet. Dr. Dean Ornish.
We do have a question on the South Beach diet.
30 years now, and I hate to get personal, but if you look at Dr. Ornish, it's like he's been following a vegetarian diet for a long time, like a vegan diet, and when in a vegan diet, you're not getting enough of the healthy kind of protein. It's hard to make tissues, and Dr. Ornish doesn't really have that vibrant kind of boisterous, vigorous health that you ought to have when you're spending that much time and energy, strictly following a diet. You want to be eating the right kind of diet, and the reality is we are omnivores. There is no getting around that. We are meant to eat a lot of our calories from animals. It's just that the animals these days that we're eating are fed grains, and they're overprocessed, and they're not running around getting their exercise like they ought to be, so there's too much saturated fat. But the point is, we're really going to be healthier if you include some animal protein in your diet. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But so Dr. Ornish, who, by the way, is very enlightened when it comes to things like stress reduction, exercise, and social support, but his diet is and has been for a long time completely off track. He says that you should cut your calorie intake from fat down to 10%. All fats are bad. Nuts, avocados are off limits. You need to eat a lot of meals during the day. I don't know. My wife Joan and I sort of the snacks are okay if you're hungry, but if you're not hungry, you don't need to go out of your way to be eating snacks. If you eat the kind of meals we talk about eating, protein, a lot of vegetables, a little fruit, 3 times a day, honestly, you don't get hungry a lot of the time until the next meal. But in any event, Dr. Ornish, food choices, he says beans and legumes, fruits, grains, nuts. I mean, not nuts, but vegetables. He emphasizes a lot of beans and a lot of grains, and I think that he's off track there. And he says stay away from all kinds of meat, all kinds of oils, including olive oil, all nuts, seeds, all dairy products. It's hard to get your calcium if you're not consuming dairy products, and I think it's much healthier to get your calcium from dairy products and bones rather than calcium supplements. So where he is on track is he says, try to avoid sugar and simple sugar derivatives. I think we can all agree on that. Finally here, the Apple-Cider-Vinegar diet. Well, it's another sort of bad diet. But there is some shred of truth to this. Adding vinegar, and it doesn't necessarily have to be apple cider vinegar, but adding 2 tablespoons of vinegar to a meal will markedly slow digestion, and so it will reduce post-meal glucose spikes. So there's a lot to be said for that. And on the other hand, drinking apple cider vinegar is pretty darn nasty tasting. I mean, I think I like my salad vinegar and extra virgin olive oil, but drinking some apple cider vinegar, that would be hard to make a habit out of. So I think that we can largely dismiss that one. So a slide that I would like to spend some time on is the My Healthy Plate, which is going out in our next From the Heart newsletter that goes out to, it's going to be hundreds of thousands of people to addresses, postal addresses, as well as email addresses. And if you want a copy of this, Aaron will make it available to be downloaded. This whole newsletter is about 20 pages long. It's mostly on diet, and that's basically the bottom line. You follow that diet, and you cannot do better than that, I guarantee you. This is tried and true. There's nothing bad about it, and you can simplify it down to, as shown in this, think about your plate. You pick 2 vegetables, preferably brightly colored vegetables, about at least a half a cup each. Serving is a half a cup. Have some lean protein, things like egg whites, or a piece of fish, or a chicken breast, or a piece of lean red meat. And then for dessert, you can have some fruit, like berries are ideal. Brightly colored fruit's best. And so for your oils, extra virgin olive oil is really what you ought to use exclusively, and then drink for your beverages. You want to use mostly non-caloric beverages like water, green tea, coffee. Try to avoid using cream and sugar in your coffee, or even artificial sweeteners. You can use skim milk or low-fat milk, or even 4% milk for just a few ounce or two for the coffee. So non-fat dairy, 1 to 2 servings a day, like skim milk. An ideal breakfast is non-fat, unsweetened Greek yogurt. Add some raw nuts, whatever raw nuts you prefer, like walnuts, pecans, almonds, and then some berries, like, well, any kind of berries you want. It's a really great breakfast. So we don't really like people drinking any sort of juice, including for juice fasts, except for low-sodium vegetable juice, our favorite, and what I drink every day, low-sodium V8 juice, like 2 glasses a day. Will do all sorts of good things for you, including help burn off belly fat, but loaded with vitamin C, loaded with potassium, and antioxidant pigments, and low in sugar and low in salt. You cannot use regular vegetable juice or regular V8 juice because it's way too high in sodium. So, and then finally over in the right-hand corner, the more vegetables you eat, the better you'll look and feel. There's no question about that. Choose a wide variety of vegetables, and you need really on the order of at least 6, if not 10 servings of vegetables a day. And if you do that low-sodium V8 juice thing, that's like 3 servings of vegetables between those 2 glasses right there, 2 to 4 servings of vegetables. So that's a good way to do it. The green leafy vegetables are particularly important. You start eating that instead of the grains, and very good things will happen to everything, from your belly fat burning away, your blood pressure coming down, your mood will be better, your skin tone is improved, the color and the skin turgor. So it's also important to be active at least 30 minutes per day. Walking is fine. We like cross-training, weight lifting, that sort of thing. And then in the lower left-hand corner, we're talking about protein. Each of the 3 meals is protein, mentioned briefly. Try to avoid highly processed meat. They can be too salty. So let's see. I think that pretty much wraps it up for.
Yeah, we do have several questions.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah. So a big part of your healthy plate is vegetables. In the South Beach, you mentioned using low glycemic index vegetables. What's the big difference in if you is eating higher glycemic index vegetables a bad choice, or should you really just try to find
no, and it's actually glycemic. People talk about glycemic index, but glycemic load is more important, and so low glycemic load vegetables is probably important. And, for the most part, you can eat all the vegetables you want, except probably to try to avoid potatoes, unless you want to use a little bit of red new potatoes from time to time. And corn, you don't want to overdo the corn, but other vegetables are healthy. And so the glycemic load, like carrots, is a high glycemic index vegetable, but its glycemic load is very low. It won't raise your glucose, full of antioxidant pigments and fiber. It's really good for you. Carrots are among the healthiest things you can eat. So sometimes you can't just simplify it totally down to glycemic index. One thing that we've gotten into the habit of eating around the O'Keefe household is the kale, we call it the kale antioxidant salad. It's black belly salad. It's a phenomenally, I think, delicious and healthy salad, and the kids love it now too, and everything is basically kale and red cabbage, red onion, cilantro, and let's see, I guess that's about it. We dress it with extra virgin olive oil and red wine vinegar, and it lasts for days, so you can cut it up and mix it and eat some tonight, some tomorrow night, some the next night. We make it about twice a week. Eat it most nights now. That recipe is also in the PDF that they can download from the coming up from the Heart newsletter, which will be hitting the mail mailed to the addresses in the next week or so.
In previous food plates that the USDA has put out in the food pyramid, grains was a big part of it. What's the difference between whole grain and whole wheat, and it sounds like you're not an advocate for either.
Well, grains, I can consider one of the biggest urban myths in America today is the wholesome nature of whole grains. And whole grains are better than, say, processed grains, but it's kind of a bit like say, whether cocaine or methamphetamine is bad. It's like they're both bad for you compared to vegetables and fruits and nuts and berries and lean protein. We're not really designed to eat a lot of grains, a little bit of whole grains. The whole grains that we really endorse are wild rice, steel-cut oats, quinoa, and whole barley, like pearl barley. Other than that, even whole grain, it's like a piece of whole grain wheat bread. It raises your glucose more than white bread. It raises, or as much as white bread, and it raises your glucose as much as and as quickly as like 5 teaspoons of pure sugar. So it's just that they don't have that many nutrients in them. They are high in fiber, the whole grains, and so like 1 or 2 servings of those whole grains we mentioned a minute ago are healthy, but otherwise, for the most part, Americans would be way better off if they didn't eat their 133 pounds of grain per year. And they also, the average American eats like 150 pounds of added sugar per year. If you could eliminate those 2 things right there, the average American would probably be normal weight and much, much healthier. You got to think about those easily digestible carbohydrates from grains and sugars as toxic to your system.
One diet we didn't talk about, we had a question on, was the Mediterranean. And do you have any concerns leaning towards that diet?
No, the Mediterranean diet is another great diet. My problem with the Mediterranean diet is like, the average American thinks of Mediterranean diet, they think that it's pasta and pizza. And those foods are consumed in Mediterranean diets, but in relative moderation, small quantities, small servings. But yeah, basically what we're talking about is the Mediterranean diet. It's like extra virgin olive oil, lots of vegetables, lots of fish, lots of nuts and berries. Eat close to nature. That is, most of the foods you eat should have not more than 1 or 2 ingredients. Just use that as a rule, 1 or 2 ingredients, and you'll probably be better off. So and yeah, it kind of limits processed foods, reduces the amount of fatty red meat. A glass of red wine with the evening meal. Those are all things that we would heartily endorse. And I think that a lot of people just don't understand what the Mediterranean diet is. So I think it makes more sense to be specific about exactly what you ought to be eating and what not. And it can be pretty simple, as we talked about in the My Healthy Plate. You can just eat that way. I guarantee you, whatever your problems are, will be better.
We've got 2 more questions if you have time for them.
Sure.
One is, do you have to, usually healthy food can be more costly. How would you go about buying whole health foods on a Walmart-style budget, a lower
Yeah,
budget?
right, that's a good question. So it is more expensive. There's no question about it to get your calories from these sources. But number one, there's never been a culture in the history of mankind that has spent a smaller proportion of their annual income as a culture on food. Food is cheap in America. And granted, it's more expensive to eat healthy, but this is like the most important investment you can make in your long-term health. Buy fruits and vegetables. If you look around, you can find that. You can find healthy, lean protein. You can find inexpensive fish and these fruits and vegetables. These are like extremely good investment, not only in your health and your weight and your happiness and your longevity. I mean, it really just improves everything. Even like with respect to your expenditures on healthcare, which is a big portion of what people spend their money on. Their healthcare insurance and doctor's bills, things like that, can be markedly reduced when you eat this kind of food. So we can't afford not to eat this way.
The last question we have has to do with age and losing fat and the best diet. If you're 68, would you recommend something different than for someone who's in their 20s, as far as following a
No, this is pretty much not age specific. I mean, granted, the metabolism tends to slow down with age, and that's why daily exercise is important. But it's not like somebody age 68 needs a different diet than somebody age 28. They probably will eat fewer calories, but the beauty of eating the way we suggest is that you can eat really all the non-starchy vegetables you want. In fact, we eat tons of them, and it just fills you up, and there's no calories in it. So you don't have to be sitting around counting calories, and this will naturally cut your calories back because it fills you up, it keeps you filled up. It'll naturally cut your calories back to a sustainable level that keeps your waistline trim and your overall muscle mass up. You know, when you eat a diet like the Ornish diet, you're cutting calories, but you're cutting the protein, the animal protein calories so much that you tend to burn off, you melt away your muscle along with your fat, and so you end up with these, you know, skinny arms and legs and not enough muscle mass to keep you strong and vigorous and vital. So it's really important to have the right protein in your diet too.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Dr. O'Keefe. And a recording of this webinar will be emailed to all attendees in the next week with a link to the most recent edition of CardioTabs from the Heart, a 10-time winner of the prestigious Healthcare Advertising Awards National Competition. Thank you again for attending, and we look forward to answering your health and nutrition questions again. Thank you, Dr. O'Keefe.
Thanks, Aaron. I just mentioned to people to make sure and download that latest from the Heart, because there's all sorts of very specific information about diet in there. So.
All right. Well, appreciate your time spent with us.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. Good work.
See ya.